Ukraine says it has started to send ships across the Black Sea along what it describes as humanitarian corridors. The first that left Odesa on Wednesday morning carrying an unspecified cargo. The Hong Kong-flagged container ship is one of many that have been stuck in Ukrainian ports since the beginning of the war. Russia has said that it would consider all ships in the area to be possible military carriers. In July, Moscow left an agreement that allowed the safe passage of grain shipments. The resumption of ship movements raises the possibility of intervention by Russian warships and comes amid rising tensions in the Black Sea.
Summer, sun, sand and sea. The beaches of Odesa reopened this month for the first time since Russia's invasion. It may look idyllic, but this Ukrainian Black Sea city is now at the heart of a battle over military and geopolitical interests. Russia has long been the prominent naval power in the Black Sea, with its fleet stationed in Crimea. But the western shores are controlled by NATO allies Romania and Bulgaria, and part of the eastern shore belongs to NATO partner Georgia. In the south, NATO member Turkey is the gatekeeper of the Black Sea, controlling the only access point through the Bosporus Strait. In the early days of the war, Russia started mining Ukrainian waters and blockading its ports, including Odesa. The blockade disrupted Ukraine's grain export, leaving millions of people affected, particularly in African nations. After months of uncertainty, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the United Nations brokered a deal last summer for Russia to allow Ukraine to export its grain. But in July this year, ahead of a Russia-Africa summit, Vladimir Putin pulled out of the deal, with Moscow announcing ships serving Ukrainian ports would no longer be safe. Tensions continue to rise as Russia began a bombing campaign targeting Ukraine's port infrastructure in Odesa. That forced Ukraine to find alternative routes, sending its exports to smaller ports along the river Danube on its western border. But there too, Russia took action, bombing the port of Reni, seen here filmed just a few hundred meters away in Romania, a NATO country. Ukraine also ramped up its attacks, targeting Navy vessels in Russian ports and several Russian ships in the Black Sea. And then last week came another clash, with Russia's Navy firing warning shots at a Palau-flagged vessel after it failed to stop for inspection. It was boarded in a dramatic raid, but later allowed to continue to a Ukrainian Danube port. Russia's president has said he is open to returning to the grain deal, but only in exchange for better conditions for Russia's own exports. But vital Ukrainian grain exports remain stuck in storage facilities and in trucks, waiting to be picked up, as the Black Sea standoff is fast reaching boiling point.
Well, let's pick this up with Dr. Sebastian Bruns, who heads the Centre for Maritime Strategy at Kiel University's Institute for Security Policy. Welcome to DW. What do you think, then, is the Ukrainian thinking, sending cargo ships across the Black Sea despite those Russian warnings?
Good afternoon, Phil. Yes, this is a very important point that Ukraine is making. It's trying to defy the Russian threat of sinking or attacking those ships. And it is a very important sign also in a humanitarian factor, because these ships that are currently passing, or the first one of which just departed, have been detained in Ukraine for over a year, since the war broke out. So all of this is diplomatically and strategically very important.
The humanitarian aspect of the excuse is a bit thin, isn't it, given that the cargo on board this ship is unspecified. No one knows what's on there.
Well, by the looks of it, that's true. The cargo has been in the containers in the port from my telling since February, at least February of last year. And so, whatever is left that could be sold on the market is probably, not a whole lot. Is there anything? Is there grain in there or something like that? We don't know, and I'm sure the Ukrainians won't tell us anytime soon.
So, what happens then if Russia does intercept or attack one of these ships?
Well, it's always a question of how does such an attack go forward? Is it a mere boarding that we've seen with the other freighter that was mentioned in the report? Is there some shooting? Is the ship going to be targeted with mines, with special forces, with anti-ship missiles, these kind of things? That would really be a more of an escalationary move, and could really raise up the risk in the region and quickly falter the humanitarian argument, as well as Ukrainians' efforts to use the sea routes once again.
The escalation factor, of course, is increased because we have 3 NATO countries bordering the Black Sea. And that escalation doesn't even have to be deliberate, does it? Could be entirely accidental.
Absolutely right. This is an issue that needs to be addressed. Individuals, policymakers, militaries need to think about scenarios and the possible consequences. Anything from up to an Article 5 issue. But to me, this is not just a NATO issue. Any country, any nation that's interested in the freedom of the seas and in open waters in the high seas should be trying to support, the sailing of cargo ships and military ships into the Black Sea, because the Black Sea is not a Russian lake.
So as far as we know, are Ukraine's hands completely clean? Have there been suspicions that Kyiv has used cargo ships for military purposes in the past?
Well, I don't have any insight into that. I wouldn't completely rule it out because, as it should be clear, Ukraine is under a direct threat in a full-scale war with its neighbor Russia, and so they might be finding ways and finding reasons to circumvent certain rules that are rules of the road that usually work in the maritime domain. But I would have to speculate. I don't know.
Thanks for that, Dr. Sebastian Bruns from Kiel University's Institute for Security Policy.
My pleasure.
Well, Turkey is one of 3 NATO countries bordering the Black Sea, and our correspondent, Dorian Jones in Istanbul, can tell us more. Welcome, Dorian. How's Turkey reacting to these increased tensions there?
With a great deal of concern. I mean, since the onset of this Ukrainian conflict and Russia's invasion, Ankar's biggest concern is that that conflict will spread to the Black Sea. Turkey has the longest Black Sea coast, and its concern is that that Black Sea could become a battleground. Now, with the collapse of this grain deal and these rising escalations, this boarding of by Russian forces of a cargo ship serving Ukraine on Sunday has caused a great deal of concern in Ankara, and now we have Ukraine challenging what is seen as a de facto Russian blockade with a cargo ship leaving along its humanitarian corridor. Turkey will be watching very carefully what will happen to that ship. The fear is that if that ship is in any way targeted, this could ultimately lead to retaliation from Ukraine targeting Russian supertankers. Something in the region of 40% of Russia's exports go from Black Sea ports through Turkish waters onto the international markets. So the fear is that this is potential to rapidly escalate, and Ankara will be determined to prevent that.
Right. This Turkey, as you say, doesn't allow warships to access the Black Sea and opposes any NATO missions in the area.
Yeah, that's right. Turkey, under the Montreux Convention of 1936, is the effective gatekeeper to the Black Sea. And since the onset of this conflict, Turkey behind the scenes has given a message to Russia and also to key NATO members: don't ask for permission for ships to enter the Black Sea. And that effectively has hit Russia very hard. The sinking of the Moskva, its flagship in the Black Sea, was a major blow to Russia, but it has been prevented by replacing it with its sister ship under this ongoing shut out by Turkey. But Turkey's message to Russia is that if we allow your ships to enter the Black Sea, then we will be beholden to allow NATO ships. And certainly the United Kingdom and other NATO members have requested behind the scenes to ask permission to enter the Black Sea, and Turkey's reply is don't ask officially, as we don't want to say no. That careful balancing act, though, is likely to come under increasing pressure if these tensions over the Ukraine grain deal continues to escalate and pressure on world food prices start to rise.
Now, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan did play an important role in brokering the UN grain deal last year. Is he working to get Russia back on board?
Yes, certainly. I mean, for Erdogan, this is one of his greatest diplomatic successes. It made him centre stage, and that success is seen as something that's very important for Erdogan, not only diplomatically, but also he's aware that the risk of this escalation of the conflict in the Black Sea could continue to grow if this ongoing grain deal is on ice, as it were. And Erdogan has, behind the scenes, been reaching out to Moscow to come back. But relations between Turkey and Russia, while have been very good in recent months, have markedly deteriorated in the last few weeks. And Moscow could be punishing Turkey here. Putin was expected to come to Turkey in August. There's no news of that visit anymore. But Turkey will be looking to Russia at some point to come back. It will say that is in everyone's interest, and Erdogan will be using a lot of diplomatic pressure on Moscow. But for now, at least, Moscow seems to be playing the waiting game. It's aware that there is new grain harvest coming in Ukraine, and the silos in Ukraine are full. That will cause major problems for Ukraine. So I think Turkey is aware Moscow could be playing a waiting game for a while.
Thanks for that, Dorian. Dorian Jones in Istanbul.
Let's get more on this story from Gustav Gressel with the European Council on Foreign Relations in Berlin. He's a military expert who has also appealed for funding for the Ukrainian military. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. The Black Sea has become a flashpoint in this war. Can you tell us who is stronger in these waters? Is it Ukraine or is it Russia?
Obviously, it's Russia. They have an established navy. Ukraine has only a coastal defense force. So Russia uses and leverages its ability to control the sea further out of Ukraine's coastline to try and enforce a blockade on Ukraine. This is an economic cut-off strategy. They try to ruin those economic activities that still bring revenues into Ukraine, production of electricity, and now production of agricultural products, particularly grain and corn. So that's basically what they're trying to achieve.
Now, a Ukrainian government agency earlier this month declared that the waters around Russia's Black Sea ports will be a war risk area from August 23rd until further notice. Can you tell us more about what that means?
Yes, so this war risk zone declaration, that's basically established rule if you conduct naval warfare against another country and you intend to mine a country or intend to use other means of naval warfare, like, for example, unrestricted submarine warfare. You declare the waters you are going to conduct this as a war zone. Remember the declaration of war zones of German and British waters during World War I. That's basically the same procedure. Russia has done so with the Ukrainian coastline as part of the rationale of its blockade, and as a counter-move, Ukraine has done so for the Russian coastline. Now, you need to remember that before the war, 40% of Russia's oil exports went via Novorossiysk, a Russian port in the Black Sea with a big oil exporting terminal. Now, as pipeline exports to Europe are stalling, this share has probably increased. Second, most of these tankers who are heading for Novorossiysk actually are insured by Western insurance companies illegally, because this is under sanctions, but they don't bother anyway because there are high profits with buying cheap Russian oil. And usually for 1.5 years, they went there unmolested. Now, of course, if it's a war zone and if Ukrainian unpiloted vehicles, so basically water drones, strike these port facilities, the risk for your ships to be actually damaged increase. And hence the issue of insurance and illegal shipping of Russian oil becomes an issue for these companies again. And Ukraine hopes that they will be hesitant going to Russia and hence cripple Russia's oil export. That's basically what's behind it.
Yeah, now we should also mention there are 3 NATO member states bordering the Black Sea. How likely do you think it is that this will become an arena of direct conflict between NATO and Russia? Concerns there are running high.
Well, actually, you can deconflict such a conflict. The problem is Russia tries to always push its boundaries of what it is able to do and what the other countries are willing to accept beyond what is kind of sort of the usual habit or what is there in international law. That's why NATO countries need to be quite vigilant and insist on the right of free navigation, insist on safety of their own maritime traffic, and not only do so on paper and diplomatic demarches, but securing that by military means and showing Russia that we are able and willing to enforce that. Unfortunately, here NATO is pretty lazy. Romania and Bulgaria basically lack the means to do so because of their weak navies. Turkey plays its own game, trying to very much leverage its position as guardian of the Straits against the Americans to exert further concessions. And Washington is very unwilling to actually enter the Black Sea militarily, basically has clandestinely or tacitly conceded the notion that the Black Sea is a Russian pond. So we have a lack of will and a lack of resources amongst the countries that have a will to do so. And that's the problem.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights with us. That is Gustav Gressel from the European Council on Foreign Relations.
Good morning.